Hello, and thanks for joining us for Sustaining Us here on KLCS PBS. I'm David Nazar. Money and electricity, is there a connection? Are you familiar with cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, blockchain? Cryptocurrency is basically a virtual currency, a type of unregulated digital money available electronically. No dollar bills, quarters, nickels, nothing like that. Cryptocurrency financial transactions are online through your computer, an app, or even what's known as a digital wallet. Cryptocurrencies are not issued through any central banking authority, so in theory, there's really no government control, interference, or manipulation. Now, the first cryptocurrency created about a decade ago was Bitcoin, which still remains popular and valuable. Cryptocurrency has been praised and criticized, and we're going to find out why from a leading financial expert. First, though, the most unique and creative cryptocurrency tutorial brought to you through a special collaboration with KLCS PBS and Arizona State University's Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications, as we partner with and mentor students seeking to explore sustainability and the environment through their reporting. Here is Jenna Miller with Cronkite News.
Cryptocurrency. Even the name of it sounds, well, cryptic, right? But a lot of people are super excited about it. We're going to tell you why, but we're also talking about a big problem: the vast amount of energy the system uses. Let's start with Monopoly. So imagine we're all playing a game of Monopoly. In the game, one person is the banker, and the other players have to go through the bank to make transactions. In simple form, this basic setup is the way every major monetary system in the world works. But there's some issues with the system. Because banks and other financial institutions have so much power, they get to skim some money off the top of each transaction. With lots of power centralized in one place, there's lots of opportunities for fraud or theft. So let's say in our game of Monopoly, we don't want to give all this power to the bank, so we get rid of it. Now we need a new system to keep track of our finances, and we decide to try cryptocurrency. There's lots of different types of cryptocurrencies, but let's stick to Bitcoin since that's the most popular one right now. We don't trust anyone to be in charge of Bitcoin, so everyone needs to keep track of every transaction. When someone buys their first Bitcoin, they download a digital wallet, which has an encrypted record of every transaction ever made. We no longer have a designated banker, but some players have to take on extra responsibilities. As the game is played, it's their job to check all new transactions to make sure they are legitimate and in the right order. These players are called miners. Even though we have a physical representation of a Bitcoin on the board right now, remember it's a digital currency. It only has value because people believe it has value and are willing to trade stuff for it. So now our game has progressed, and Player 1 wants to buy St. James Place from Player 2. To pay, she'll send a message to everyone in the network to say, Player 1 sends 1 Bitcoin to Player 2, but it'll be encoded with a special key that proves it's really from Player 1 and not a hacker or a thief. The miners will check it with all the previous transactions to make sure Player 1 really has a Bitcoin to send to Player 2. In exchange for checking things out, the miners get a small fraction of a Bitcoin called a tip. But what if Player 2 tries to pay Player 3 and Player 4 at the same time, but he doesn't have enough Bitcoin for both transactions? Remember, there's no central authority to decide which transaction is legitimate or spread the information. Instead, the message spreads by bouncing from user to user, and there could be a discrepancy about who owns the Bitcoin based on which message got to each user first. The solution to these disputes involves something called blockchain. Creating the blockchain is what uses so much energy, so we have to talk a little bit about how it works. Let's pack up Monopoly and start playing Battleship. Imagine your opponent has only one ship on the board. You've got to guess again and again to find it. Now imagine that all of your friends are also playing the same game of Battleship, and you're competing to see who can hit the ship first. This is basically what Bitcoin miners are doing, but they use powerful computers to make guesses. The more computing power a miner has, the faster they can go. Whoever guesses the correct answer first gets a big reward. But instead of launching a couple hits on a ship, the computers are guessing multiple answers to a complex math problem called a hash function. The computers have to guess a string of letters and numbers out of millions of combinations. All of that computing takes lots and lots of electricity. But the difficulty and the randomness of the race is important because it makes it nearly impossible to cheat the system. Now, wait, what does all of this have to do with using Bitcoin? Well, these Bitcoin miners are not just solving computer puzzles to get rewards. Remember, this whole thing is about solving disputes about the order of transactions. To explain, let's get out Jenga. So imagine each Jenga piece is a transaction. Miners group the transactions they receive into blocks. Transactions that have already happened are linked in a chain of blocks like this Jenga tower. Like I said before, miners might have different versions of the same block of transactions because of delays in the network. The miners compete using those complicated math problems we talked about earlier to have their block be the next one in the chain. The winning block links to the chain, and the winning miner receives a reward of 12.5 Bitcoin. That's worth about $100,000. Once the blocks are linked, the order can't be changed. If a hacker tries to change one of the previous transactions, everyone in the network will be alerted. The Bitcoin network is set up so that a new block can be added to the chain an average of every 10 minutes. As Bitcoin value rises, more people with more computing power compete to solve the puzzle. The function automatically becomes more and more difficult to solve to maintain the average time. This system is integral to how Bitcoin works, and making the puzzle easier to solve would make the currency easier to attack. But the computing power takes a lot of energy. According to the widely cited Bitcoin website, Digiconomist, each Bitcoin transaction used the same amount of energy that it takes to power 28 American homes for one day. That number is constantly rising. The energy used to power the network for just 1 second could power about 4 average American cars for a week. The entire Bitcoin network uses about the same amount of energy as the country of Switzerland. Cryptocurrency and blockchain supporters say this technology will revolutionize our entire payment system. But to get anywhere close to that future, those who build and use cryptocurrency have to solve their massive energy problem.
And joining me now from Switzerland to discuss all of this further is Amit Pradhan. Amit is the president of the Silicon Valley Blockchain Society and an investor in what's known as AI and blockchain space. Amit is also a board member at the Norwegian Refugee Council. Thank you so much for being here, Amit. And I know you have a lot more on your resume.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Amit, our student reporter, Jenna Miller, just gave such a great creative overview of cryptocurrency using those examples of the iconic games Monopoly, Battleship, Jenga. Explain in your own words more about cryptocurrency in some of the terms she was talking about in her story, such as Bitcoin, mining, blockchain.
Yeah, it was a great video, really well done. So at a very high level, a cryptocurrency is a currency that uses cryptography. It is digital, it is not physical. Bitcoin is, like the US dollar, a store of value. Unlike the US dollar, it is not controlled by a central authority like the Federal Reserve. It is, of course, entirely digital, no physical money changes hands, and it has a limited supply. Only 21 million Bitcoins can be mined, which then comes to that third term, mining. Mining is essentially a function of confirming a transaction by completing a very complex mathematical equation, which ensures that a transaction completes, and the second function of that transaction completing is a Bitcoin gets created. And a part of that Bitcoin is awarded to this miner for the work that they have done in confirming the transaction. The blockchain is the underlying technology that allows for cryptocurrencies to work in the way that they do. And it's called the block and the chain, as was explained in Jenna's video really well.
Why, Amit, has cryptocurrency been both praised so much and also criticized so much?
Like with most, not just technological innovations, but think of cryptocurrency as a fundamental economic innovation. You always have your pros and your cons. With great power comes great responsibility, and we've seen this with the internet in the past. Not everything on the internet is good, right? And cryptocurrency has had its share of negatives. It's been associated with making just a small bunch of people really wealthy, which is true. It's been associated with illegal transfer of money and being used for illegal transactions. But the positives are massive. They outweigh the negatives significantly. The ability to create currency for communities is a very powerful message. The idea of not having a centralized body decide and control what happens with this currency is very powerful. And truly, the democratization of access, freedom, and money is a very powerful sentiment and tool for the kind of society we want to create for the future.
What exactly is the history, I guess you could say, of people creating their own money? Because in reality, this has been going on for decades, possibly even centuries. And certainly while cryptocurrency is a newer type of currency today, correct me if I'm wrong, this idea of money creation, this is not a new phenomenon, Amit.
You're absolutely right. And to be precise, 6,000 years ago was when we had the first creation of communities and people creating money. If you go back to the time when England was under attack by Napoleon, the small Channel Islands of Guernsey and Jersey actually issued their own currency to deal with the fact that the British government was near bankruptcy. And it is what kept them out of economic insolvency. And even today, $36 million of local currency are in circulation for a population of just 60,000 people. We saw this during the massive inflation that the German mark, the German currency, had post-World War I, when they printed a lot of money to make reparations to all of the countries. And if it wasn't for the local communities and the local towns creating their own currency so that they could stay solvent and stay operational, inflation would have been so high that they would not have been able to operate. And you see what happened with places like Venezuela. And so in history, communities have created currencies. This is the first time when that currency is truly decentralized, and the use of technology has allowed that to happen, so that you don't just create the next centralized power that came out of the birth of the first one not working properly. So this is not new, and it's really exciting where we're at now.
And you mentioned technology. Getting back to something Jenna said in her report, there is the concern certainly about the cryptocurrency taxing the energy grid. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, the way that the mining works, as I mentioned earlier, the complex mathematical equations that get solved require a lot of compute power. And that means the electricity demand is so incredibly high, you can power 23 American homes with the power required to mine a Bitcoin. And so this has been a huge issue. It's been taxing the electricity grid, and this is one of the real downsides of the model that Bitcoin particularly uses for how Bitcoins are mined. The good news is 18 million out of a finite number of 21 million Bitcoins have already been mined. And so this demand on mining is going to reduce over time, and new mechanisms of proving transactions are coming up that don't require these complex computational calculations, and they will automatically start reducing the pressure on the electric grid, for example.
Amit, thank you so much. Stay with us. We're going to get back with you in just a moment after this next report, also from our student colleague, Jenna Miller at Arizona State University's Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications, as she further explores cryptocurrency and the cost benefit.
This technology is not just disruptive, but completely transformative in the same way that the internet was. Because when you think about what happened when the cost of transporting information dropped to zero, it just became flows within our lives. And I think the same thing will happen to money. When the cost of transporting money drops to near zero, you won't have a monthly paycheck. You won't have a monthly phone bill. You'll pay for minutes on your phone as you use them. So you'll make a phone call, it will negotiate a 1-minute contract with AT&T, and the very next minute it might negotiate a 1-minute contract with T-Mobile, and it'll send the payment in the data stream that's your voice.
My machines out there right now are making roughly $30 a day. I have 15 units, so that's $450. That's more than I made at my job. And it's 7 days a week. They work overtime. This is the display of one of those miners. It's giving you the readout for the last hour. Both my son and I got into it as a joint venture. He's more of a, I want to say, you could say a computer geek. We built out our first 2 rigs in his house. We got them up and running. I was watching it very closely and I was getting rather excited as it went from $15 to 20, 40, 50, 75, 100. The biggest expense you have in mining is the cost of electricity. It adds up. 24 hours a day, I end up with a pretty good electric bill.
Right now, just single network such as Bitcoin consumes more electricity than really entire Denmark. Cryptocurrencies, they create value by solving very complex problems, and they will consume more and more energy.
Making the network more efficient is a longer-term goal. Honestly, I don't think there's enough attention being paid to it. I think that a lot of people are blindly saying more is better, and I think that there needs to be a shift in the way people think about this, because at the end of the day, our environment is impacted, and there's a cost there too.
Thanks, Jenna Miller and the Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications for that report. Now, getting back with you, Amit, give me your impression of that retired miner we just heard from in Jenna's report.
Yeah, that's an excellent report, and that's such a lovely story, but it's important to understand that that is not the story for everyone. And I would really strongly advocate people don't drop all of their retirement money to go and treat these rigs of computers to do these complex equations, because it's A, not simple, and B, the returns have been massively reducing by design. 2, we don't want everyone to just start using up a lot of compute and in turn use up a lot of electricity. But at the end of the day, what that story to me really highlights is that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies have created the opportunity for people to become entrepreneurs. It's created this opportunity for people to find things that they can do to add value into this whole ecosystem, and thereby create a revenue stream for them, like that retired miner, which is an excellent story. But again, I say, look at it with caution.
Could you detail for folks why, in your opinion, cryptocurrency is a sustainability issue, whether it's economic sustainability or environmental sustainability?
Yeah, it's a very good question. The environmental sustainability issue comes in 2 parts. You have what we just discussed, which is this, a lot of pressure on the electrical grid because of the amount of compute power that's required, and that's starting to change, and that'll go away. The second is there's a lot of solutions using the blockchain and these cryptocurrencies to make both the electric grid as well as the green energy grid not only more powerful and better utilized, but also allowing individuals to start participating in how they can earn money from being able to create green energy. And the blockchain especially has proven with a bunch of projects to be an incredible tool for that. So there's 2 aspects on the sustainability side. On the economic sustainability side, the fact that in so many countries around the world, so many currencies facing the challenges that they are, the fact that talented young people can now step in and find a way to take control in some way of their economic futures because they can get involved in the world of cryptocurrency is such a powerful tool. And I think from a long-term economic sustainability perspective, this is wonderful for societies going forward.
What has happened going forward since Bitcoin was created about 10 years ago, Amit?
It's been an amazing evolution. So from the time that the first wallet was created where a Bitcoin could be stored, there are now 50 million blockchain wallets just at the end of June 2020. We've come a very long way. It is starting to become mainstream. We've seen incredible advancements in the underlying technology that powers cryptocurrencies. We've seen a lot of investments in the world of blockchain from investors, both retail as well as institutional. And it's allowed for the technology to evolve really rapidly. Performance, security, speed of transactions, ease of use. We're now starting to see the next wave, which is, not just for people like myself involved in the blockchain world, but how does, the average retiree in Florida or the farmer in Uganda benefit from and get to use in the simplest form these society-changing currencies and the underlying technology. We've seen governments start to get involved. The governments of Estonia and Dubai in the UAE are using the blockchain to manage a lot of incredible services for their citizenry, including driver's licenses, applications for passports, land and title, other identity for people to be banked. And so we've seen a really interesting evolution. It's accelerating very quickly, as often happens with the adoption cycles of most technology. And we're starting to see sovereign nations create their own cryptocurrency. China is a great example. They've created and launched what is known as the China digital currency, which is a digital crypto version of their fiat currency. So we have come a very long way in the last 10 years since Satoshi's white paper on Bitcoin.
And you did begin to talk about this. Talk a bit more about, I guess you could say, what industries, what segments of society, which people are reaping the rewards of blockchain the most?
Yeah, and once you transition from the initial investors who by natural cadence reap the early rewards, we're starting to see the use of blockchain when it comes to things like identity and provenance. By design, it's the perfect way to show identity. I'll give you a very quick example. For refugees who come to refugee camps without any passports or any form of identity, being able to give them this digital decentralized identity, which they can carry with them anywhere they go, regardless of whether the refugee camp that issued that identity continues to exist or not, is so powerful going forward. It's the same thing with supply chains. And we talked about the e-government concept earlier. We're starting to see these services being delivered not just to the wealthy, but to the vulnerable in society as well. And that really is a hallmark of the right use of technology, when it doesn't just benefit the people who it most naturally gravitates towards, the people with the money and the means, but the people who are the average common citizenry, and even oftentimes the most vulnerable. So it is starting to benefit these people. And if I look at the trajectory over the next 10 years, we're going to see the blockchain be more a tool for good than a tool for the wealthy.
Perfect answer for my final question. And what is going on now with cryptocurrency and blockchain that we don't know about? In other words, who's creating the future of this industry now?
Yeah, there's a lot of incredible startups, actually. This is a beautiful bottom-up movement. It's not the large companies that are innovating. It's startups all around the world. It's, again, not limited to Silicon Valley, for instance. It's startups around the world who are creating incredible technologies, including a concept that is very popular recently called decentralized finance, or DeFi, where essentially the ability to use these programmatic contracts for these transactions to create yield models, much like real estate creates yield if you buy into it, for average people. And the yield rates have been really, really good as well. And so we're starting to see genuine innovation that's touching our lives in ways that was only the purview of the very large companies or the large governments. And finally, I'd say this, that this is not just a technology. This is fundamentally a new economic system and economic model, one that truly has the bones to deliver on a global society that is of, by, and for the people.
Amit Pradhan, thank you so much for being here and explaining more about cryptocurrency and certainly the relation to sustainability.
Thank you very much. My pleasure being here.
Thank you so much. And for more information about our program, just click on klcs.org, then click Contact Us to send us your questions and comments or story ideas so we can hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Sustaining Us here on KLCS PBS. I'm David Nazar.